Hello everybody and welcome to the Reuse Company webinars. You will be muted during the webinar, but if you have any questions or comments, you can use the question section anytime during the presentation. The webinar will be recorded and in a couple of days we will send you the link to the recording. The topic for today is a systems engineering approach to acquisition. Our presenter is Lars Anderberg, application consultant at the Reuse Company Scandinavia, and I am Cecilia Carlson, the host for today. We will start with a few words about the company. The Reuse Company is a solution provider specializing in the application of semantic technologies and artificial intelligence to improve the digitalization of the systems engineering life cycle. Here is a picture of our tools. We offer tools for quality management of requirements, documents, and models. We also provide tools for semantic interoperability to facilitate the exchange of information between systems engineering tools within the systems engineering ecosystem, and traceability between engineering work products to enable a digital thread. And who is using our technology? Most of our customers work with safety critical products, and they come from industries like aerospace, defense, automotive, energy, healthcare, infrastructure, legal, and software, for example. We have customers all over the world, and we have offices in the US, Sweden, Spain, and partners in Belgium and Japan. Our presenter today is Lars Anderberg. Lars is an application consultant at the Reuse Company, and he has been working as a requirements engineering and acquisition support consultant for over 20 years. And he has the INCOSE ESEP and the IREP CPRE certifications. So let's start with today's topic. Hello, Lars.
Good morning, Cecilia. Good morning, everybody. As you said, Cecilia, I'm Lars Anderberg, and I will be doing the presentation now. And I will be talking a bit about acquisition as a part of the system engineering life cycle. This requires some sort of coordination and data exchange to be successful, and I will elaborate a bit on the way our SES System Engineering Suite tools will support this. There will be a few demonstrations and some words about continued work after a contract in an acquisitions context. Some words about future updates, and we will wrap it up with a summary and opportunities to raise questions. Okay, if we start with acquisition as a part of the system engineering life cycle, I assume that many of you have seen or are familiar with this V model, which is a way to represent the system life cycle according to the technical processes IEEE 15288. It describes actually what you need to do from a systems point of view, from initial idea to actually to disposal throughout the throughout the development cycle. It covers everything from a systems point of view that needs to be done. But actually the system itself does not have any need to be acquired. So this V model really doesn't care about who is doing what. And you can always recognize that acquisition, when you do this, it adds some sort of complexity to the life cycle, which is not visible in the V model. So first of all, why do you do acquisition at all? Well, the main reason, simple answer to that is because you don't do everything from scratch within one single organization. So you may use acquisition for a number of purposes, from simple cases where you actually acquire components, raw material, or consumables, or things like that. You may acquire off-the-shelf products or systems. Then I write here more or less off-the-shelf because there is often some degree of development involved in this. There may be cases where you outsource production of a already developed system. There may be cases where you outsource development of a subsystem or a complete system. There may be other cases, for example, you have a case where you will be running a midlife update, which is some sort of mix of the development for new capabilities, but also specific maintenance tasks that could be combined with it, and so on. So there are many ways to do this, from very simple cases to pretty complex cases. In theory, you could, if you are on the acquisition side, you could always sit back and relax and leave it all to the supplier. Then you will put yourself in the back seat and you will have really no control of the development activities. And you would leave that all to the supplier. That may be reasonable to do sometimes, but typically if you are an acquisition procurement agency, you would typically focus on outsourcing development of systems or subsystems. If I would try to put these scopes of acquisition in some sort of diagram, I could start with, again, raw materials, consumable, COTS components, commercial off-the-shelf components. Doesn't add much complexity and doesn't require much effort and so on. So it's a pretty easy thing to do. Commercial off the shelf, if you buy subsystem, it's a bit more complex because there will probably be some degree of development either on the COTS manufacturer side or on your own side to integrate with the subsystem that you acquire. If you would develop a totally new subsystem, that's of course more adds complexity, it takes more time and effort. Midlife update, as I mentioned, is a bit more special because then you also need to take into account some sort of logistics for managing an existing fleet of systems that should be increased in capability and also perhaps refurnished and having some maintenance activities performed on them. Full-scale system development is probably the highest complexity and takes most effort and time. This is where you would, as a customer, sort of initiate the development, but then leave most of it to the manufacturer and just to monitor and follow things up. So what do the standards for system development say in this case? Again, 15288. There are actually a section in this standard about acquisition processes, but also technical processes. And you can note that there is a sort of a 20 times more data about the technical processes than the acquisition processes. This does not really help you out. It says basically plan your acquisition and perform your acquisition. And that could be of some help to you when you're in this lower end, but it doesn't really give you any support how you should perform your activities if you're on a more complex acquisition context. So we have a sort of a intersection between system engineering focus and acquisition needs. Again, system engineering focus, that's pretty much covered by the V model from the systems point of view. This is what you need to do to develop a system. And adding acquisition to that, you will need to perform a number of things. For example, request for quotation, you need to put together a sort of package to publish to bidder candidates to say, okay, this is what we want you to do, this is what you want we want you to reply on in order for us to make an evaluation and the selection of the solution and the supplier. There are always some sort of procurement regulations involved that has to do with things like equal treatment, traceability, and transparency. This is specifically important if you're sort of running a public procurement case where this is sort of mandated by laws. So you need really to take this into account to be successful in this. Throughout this phase, there is need for having data exchange, not with the contracted part, but initially at least with more than that, any party that could be a candidate for this. So you would have to do this initially before a contract is signed with multiple parties in parallel. And this adds a bit of complexity. At some point of time, of course, you need to produce contract documents, and that should be based on the data that you have already been working on together with the bidders. This is something that is typically not supported very good in systems engineering tools. But it is actually a part of the system development, so it should be integrated in a way, and that's exactly what we're trying to target in this webinar. At some point of time, there is a contract, hopefully, and you would be more or less back on track in following the V model. And as an acquirer, your role will be to monitor progress, take part of technical reviews, verification and validation, and so on. But you would still need to have data exchange to be able to perform these tasks. Okay, so let's have a look of a case where you would do. We will have a look at of a life cycle where you first of all it's not very coordinated in the data exchange, but then I will show you also example what could be improved with that. So suppose we would run over time something like this. We would write a specification, we would issue a request for quotation, we would do some sort of evaluation of the response we will get in, we will sign the contract, and after that start with technical reviews, verification, validation, and go into operation. If you do this uncoordinated, just write your specification, wait and see what happens, and try to evaluate what you get in, and to the best of your knowledge, sign the contract, you would really not reduce the risk of misunderstandings or misconceptions, anything at all, before you possibly get as far as into the verification state. And this is where you find out if you have a problem or not. If you do, it will definitely take time, and it will definitely bring costs with it. So what we would suggest is to make a totally different approach from the beginning, and have a life cycle where you add a number of activities, and that would bring you better control of the whole life cycle. So initially, you would of course start with some basic systems engineering tasks, like having a system design document, or some other artifact where you would actually describe the solution. And if you do that internally before writing a specification, you would minimize risk for not having sort of a consistent technical specification of the system. So having internally a better understanding of the system before writing a specification is crucial. This will also, of course, be part of what you would communicate to the bidders. And while you write your specification, you should not write just technical requirements one by one, but you should assure that you do this with some sort of quality, which we have tools to support you with. You should also already here define the criteria that you would use for evaluation. That means that you should be sure what sort of technical qualities you're looking for, what sort of cost you're looking for, whatever. This is something that would often help you reduce your risk if you would look into technology readiness levels. to actually evaluate technical risks with different solutions from different suppliers. And you should add rules to this to sort of control the way the bidders should respond, because that would definitely help you to simplify your evaluation, as I will get back to later on. If you do this and you have sort of controlled what you would want the bidders to respond to before issuing the request for quotation, you would have a lower risk for internal misunderstanding, and you would have a better, you would be better equipped for having a good understanding from the bidder's point of view what you expect from them. And of course, by having some sort of communication with some bidders conference or something similar, where you would clarify your expectations and needs and so on, is always a good idea. You would, again, at some point in time, have your bids and you would start to do your evaluation. But you would also need to do some sort of clarification on these bids. Specifically, if you have some sort of technology readiness levels requested, you may want to have some sort of clarification to get a common understanding of what sort of risk you're actually going into with each and every solution. This will mean that there will be updates in bids that will be re-evaluated again. But after having this sort of dialogue with the bidders in the bid phase, you would have the opportunity to go into contract with a much better common understanding of the case. So you would have a better basis for making supplier selection, and actually experience says that the risk for appeal is very much reduced if all the bidders are involved in the process and know exactly how their chances are and what you actually are looking for. So you will be much better positioned going into contract, and then having the design reviews would be of course something that is still important, but you would do at least starting up from a much better position. In verification, you would also be you would benefit from having a sort of approach where you would do some planning and agreement before performing the actual verification, and after performing it, review the outcome, which also would require a number of data exchanges to happen to assure that you're on the same side here. And it was, if you're doing this so far, the risk for misunderstanding has reduced a lot, and the validation should hopefully be much simpler than in the other cases. So what we are suggesting is to make sure that you would have a full traceability of history of all data that has been included in the whole life cycle, including the specifications that you produce, including the evaluation criteria and rules for that, including all the replies with updates and changes also before and after contract, and also verification and validation data. This would very much simplify your monitoring of the progress in the process, and also reduce risk for misconceptions. But a crucial thing is to start with this in another phase, and typically in the tender phase, where you do data exchange with the bidders. And what you would need then is a way to handle this data exchange without really putting any requirements on technical solutions for this on the other end. So we would typically need to be very clear in generating attribute sets and rules for the response. We should define how the bidders should respond and according to what rules and so on. But we should not only explain the rules, but we should enforce them by having some sort of dynamic response sheet input validation, making sure that all bidders follow the same rules in the same way. The bids we get will be possible to import into the database that we have. That would allow us to do some traceability over time and between different specification layers and everything, and also simplify very much the evaluation. And also at some point of time, we would need to generate documentation out of this database, contract documents that would be traceable back to the database, so we could see exactly that they come from the origin of the data that we have been already been exchanging and updating. One thing that also is a side effect is having a very good commonality in the format of the bid responses. Very much simplifies evaluation, because if you would leave the field open to any bidder to their best ways of presenting their things, you would see very diverse formats and structure of the bids, and that would definitely not simplify. That would be complex for evaluation. But in this case, you would have the same sort of format and following the same rules. That would be better way to do the evaluation, which you will of course have some sort of tool support for, where you could evaluate all the bids in parallel, but you could also indicate changes in bid updates, as I will show you in the short demonstration later on, to simplify things if there will be more than one iteration, which there typically will be. Okay, so the tools we have at hand to do this is based on the System Engineering Studio, as Cecilia mentioned initially. It is a core component with a number of capabilities added to them. Capabilities for knowledge management, for the data quality and authoring and support, traceability between all sorts of repositories, interworking, decision management, verification support, and so on. And specifically this acquisition capability that has been added. I will not go through any of these in detail, because we have many more other seminars or webinars that would elaborate on this. But I would say that with this tool in the core, you are able to connect to whatever repositories you would use, for example, for requirements development. Could be all sorts of tools. I have a few examples in here, and they're not, it's not a complete list, but you could use data in some of these tools or something else, and do still the all the additional quality assurance things and completeness, consistency, and correctness checks with traceability and everything based on this tool. We can also actually connect not only to databases, but to more simple files. If you would sort of receive something in this format and you would want to trace from, for example, a standard to technical specification or vice versa, something that can also be managed in this. So you could rely on data in whatever format it comes or that you prefer to work on it. You may also use the option of not actually having an external tool, but you could store the data directly in the SES database in something that we call System Asset Store, or SAS connector within the System Engineering Studio. Having this, you will be able to do this data exchange based on files that will be importable, exportable through this Acquisition Studio capability. We could also provide, generate documents and formal documents in this way. And sort of to separate these Excel and PDF files from any other, well, I will just indicate them like this. They are still standard Excel files or PDF documents, but they will have capabilities that will allow import or export, and also to allow traceability back to the source wherever the data comes from. So a few words about these these files that we will be able to produce. They could be generated with data from any of the connections to SES that you would typically want to have as a source for your data. We can visualize changes relative to whatever previous baselines, and this alone is a pretty useful tool, because you would always have a good way to see what has happened since last iteration on the data that you produce or on the data that is received from an external party. And you always know that the data has been generated straight from the source there is internally traceability data that says that this is the original data, so you can always be sure that your database is valid. These files are completely detached. You could handle them as any standalone file. You don't need to have any connection or any specific tool support or anything to do with this. You could work with them in any computer that actually can run an Excel file or read a PDF document. So if I would go into the Excel part a bit more, the files here, there is not such a thing as one file format for this. This is definitely something that you would tailor for each export event and for each purpose and each receiver, and you would tailor the features and contents based on what you actually want to do and need to do at each time. It is, as I mentioned, editable in any sort of computer with standard Excel. No add-ins or anything needs to be done on the receiving end. When you have something returned, the changes and updates are importable to System Engineering Studio and back to the source where it initially came from for further handling in a way that you would prefer. You could make sure that data that has been agreed and frozen is protected from unauthorized updates. And it's also a visual indication to the receiver of the files that this is data that is not supposed to be changed, and it will not be changed, and there will be no risk for tampering with the wrong sort of data in the wrong way in files that we produce here. This dynamic user guidance, it actually supports the user of these files to follow the rules with some sort of input validation functionality and visualization of rules for attributes. To this, we add dynamic change indication, and you can do this relative to whatever baseline or current status to see what's has been changed and are changed as you work in the document. And there are many good ways also to present linked data. For example, if you want to make a link sufficiency evaluation to see if all the data that you have been linking is sufficiently for the completeness of the case that you're working with. As a spin-off, these files, the idea is to support data exchange in early phases, but this is also very important that with these files that are pretty capable, they could be very much useful for internal use. Specifically, you will typically have some sort of non-frequent tool users that may not be familiar with IBM Rational Doors or Siemens Polarion or whatever, but they would still need to be able to review, perhaps comment and update data. And they could easily be using some sort of files for this purpose as well for internal reasons. Okay, a few words about the PDF capabilities again. We would have a way to tailor these documents based on your company profile with layouts, logos, and document metadata and so on. This would also include export metadata to show where the data comes from. You could have revision history, you could have all sorts of cross-references and clickable links and things within it. And also something that is important, that since this will produce a PDF file, you could use whatever other add-on tools that you typically use internally for post-processing, such as you could add certificates to this, you could add digital signatures to it, and so on. And this would again assure that the data has not been tampered since the export, and that will also add credibility to the source data whenever a document like this has been signed. Okay, so now let's move into the demonstration part. I will first have a look at the way we produce this this file for a simple but powerful data exchange. And I will start with illustrating as a short scenario here. We will use a case where we have produced data, in this case in a DOORS database that is connected to System Engineering Studio, and we will use Acquisition Studio to produce files that would be used for a bidder. So we have been prepared it already. We have made a baseline to be able to go back to. We produce files. Bidders will respond to this. We will import the update. We will have a new baseline. We will then have a look at where if there is a case where we find we need to update requirements, we may need to add or change a requirement, new baseline, and give a second iteration where we would send out files for the bidders to do updates, and we would indicate changes in this. So the first step now, we would say we will have the data already. Let's export it and see what this files looks like. So we will, I'll see if I can get this run on right screen. Okay, here we go. Now I'm connecting to the System Engineering Studio, and I will sort of speed things up a bit to show the things we want to do. I'll stop here for a minute. I can see that we can connect to data in all sorts of repositories, and this is the, not a complete set of tools or file formats that we can support. It's partly based on what has been installed on the computer where this is run from. But you can see there are many options in here. And while doing so, we could, well, let's move ahead a bit here. Now we are inside System Engineering Studio, and we'll go into the Acquisition Studio. I have a prepared view for the request for quotation. And in this view, I have a number of attributes. And the attributes have been defined using a capability in the System Engineering Studio, which is an attribute glossary, where you define the attributes and define the values and definitions of it and so on. And you could apply these attribute definitions to whatever source that you like. There are attributes for data that is to be sent out, and there are also attributes prepared for the response with the rules what you would like the bidders to follow. Not getting too much into the details, but in this I would just want to illustrate that the attribute definition is complete with whatever description that you have generated to describe the use of the attributes, and also whatever values that are legal to them or not. Now, next thing is that you could have a way to protect the data with freeze triggers. And this is a functionality that operates in ways similar to this. You have a specific attribute where you have a specific value, freeze attribute and the indication value, and saying that for any object where this data has been set, these data, class description and so on and so forth, are to be protected and not possible to update. However, these ones, the response attributes, of course, should be editable. You could add the input validation, which is a way that you could, with some sort of formulas. This is Excel formulas that could be any formula that could be expressed in the standard Excel worksheet can be transformed into this. And you could say that you could put on rules to say, if this and this is the case, then you should have this output and so on. You will see in the prepared files. And to this also you would add some sort of formatting rules, which also based on existing Excel features, but it's been generated automatically by the tool when you export data. You would also have a way to add more data, more sort of settings to this. I will not explain it all. But you could, for example, have a purpose description where you would also, again, guide the user to as to what the purpose is with this specific file and what they should do with it, so on. With all this done, I think the only thing left is to click on this, and you would have a file exported with the capabilities that are based on the contents in the view and the rules that you've been setting up. So you would have a file that looks something like this. It's a standard Excel file, but it has a user input validation there, and you have attribute descriptions that come all the way from the source. And you can see in the user input validation, it says what the user should do. And if you have an attribute with just a few valid values, those are the only options you would have to select them, of course. Now, as you add data here, the input validation would guide you step by step until it says completed in each case. You could add specific rules, for example, a rule like this saying that if you would say not compliant to shall requirement, you would have a warning. This is, of course, tailorable. Within this example, I've selected to say that if this is a shall requirement is not compliant, there is an information saying that this bid will be disqualified because it's mandatory to be compliant with these files. Other rules can be tailored, of course. If you would say not compliant to a should requirement, you would have an option to present the reason for this and suggest an exchange of wording and so on and so forth. So the idea is that the bidder would dynamically be guided following these instructions, following the attribute rules, and they would step by step produce a file that is all green and all possible to import back to the system. So if I go one step ahead and have a look at the file that has been completed, as you can see, this was all let's move this one up here again. Okay, one step back here. This file again now is already completed, and you can see its input validation is all green here, so this should be technically correct at least. There are some non-compliances and there are some other data that has been added, all according to rules. So all we need to do now is to go back into System Engineering Studio, browse for this file, and import it. And there will be a number of checks done on this, and you would have a possibility to have a report, which can be, of course, stored in the file for later reference and so on. And the data will be updated in the SES interface and also stored all the way back to the source whenever you save this. So this data has been retrieved by the Acquisition Studio Excel files, and now it's already inside the source tool, and you should typically have a new baseline on this to make sure that you can always refer back to this point in time. Okay, so I think I should move on a bit. Say after having had this update, you will probably have a need to look into well, there's typically often cases where you find that you need to change your requirements. There may be based on input you get from some bidders. You may find out that you probably did a mistake in writing your requirement. You may have missed something, so you could add stuff to this and you could change this. It has been prepared now, and you can see there are some updates done in here. And I think let's see. No, I think I will skip this video. Will basically just show you that after having made a change, I will have a new baseline on this, and let's have a look at this now. So what we have now is that we have had some specifications, we've had some input, we have modified our own contents, and we will send out a new file that would prompt the user to update their bid based on changes that we have been making. So in this case, I will just have a problem with things popping up on the wrong screen. Sorry about that. Okay. I'm now preparing a different view in the Acquisition Studio here, where I would be able to present not only current data, but I would also add more columns, which contains here we go. It contains baseline data. So this would present data from one of the earlier baselines, in this case, the baseline representing the initial request for quotation. So the bidder could see what has been changed from our point of view. We would also add, in a similar way, from the other end, we can see there is a baseline data from request for quotation for the data that we've been sending out, but also from another baseline. This is what has been initially imported. And so, okay, so it's a bit technical details, but I've just added more data, bringing things back from history in the repository. I would do the same things. I would save the view, and I would have a new purpose for this one, as you can see up here. Please update your bid accordingly to the changes or whatever. And again, I would run the export. I would just have the file saved. And from this settings with new data, with new capabilities, I would have a file that's similar to the one I had before. But this file has indication of changes highlighted with this blue cell interior color. As you see here, the new requirement, let's go on for a bit here. If you expand these hidden columns up here, you would see the baseline, the data. So in this case, you would see in first request for quotation, this requirement did not exist, so it's empty. This is the reason why it wasn't really a compliance statement wasn't added in the first case, because this requirement didn't actually exist. Here's another requirement which has been changed. It's been clarified a bit, based actually in this example on the input you got from one of the bidders initially. So you could easily find the changes, and you could continue to work with this. And as you continue to work, also the changes done by the bidder will be indicated in the same way and traceable back in the same way to the earlier baselines. The rules still apply. There's still the same support in getting the data right. And in this case, where the bidder initially said, no, we can't do this because of something, they said not compliant. But now when the data is changed, they changed their statement. Temporarily, they will breach the rules for the attributes, but they will clear that out, and it will be all complete again for the next things. So what you see here is that there is a dynamic change on what has been changed on the sending side, in this case the acquire side, and what has been changed in the updates. And this would typically help you to evaluate what has been updated between two bid updates. It's a very simple example, but it's there to demonstrate the capabilities, not to show a very good specification of a real system. By the way, this is obviously, as you see, totally nonsense data, but it is there for showing the capabilities, nothing else. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the formal documents then. Well, we could, when we work with data, we could do, as I was just showing, we could use these acquisition studio Excel tools. We could work directly in the source tools or do anything like that. But that's the good when you generate data, validate data, review data, and so on, but not for formal documents. You want to produce the documents based on the contents you have in the source, but you would want to have that traceable back to the source where it comes from, but it should be in a format that sort of is consistent with your company profile or whatever. This is important. Whenever you make a contract, what's on the signed piece of paper, that's what rules, if it's a physical signature or a digital signature or whatever. So that means that you should be able to publish this document directly from the source and not change them and verify that they have not been changed, because then the signature will validate the contents in your database. So what you would need to do then is to add a template, and you have a way of modifying a template for this with your company profile, with the metadata that you wish to have included here, and all sorts of rules for layout and things. You would again get back to the System Engineering Studio and create a different view designed for this purpose. You would set the metadata in a specific dialog, and you would create a file from the source in a similar way as you were doing with the Excel files earlier. Save the file, and we will have a look at that. So this document with your company profile and with the metadata that you have selected and entered in the dialog, it refers back to the source where it comes from, database version and the timestamps and whatever. You will have a revision history, optional, that can be based on the baselines you have, contents, figures, everything, and present the data in a format with the attributes you selected, for example, identifier for requirements and compliance statements and agreed verification method, whatever you wish to have based on what you entered in the view and what you have defined in the template. So with this, we have now showed briefly the sorts of files we could produce for the purpose that they're meant to do. So let's wrap this up with a short look into the future after having signed the contract. This is not the end of a contract relationship between acquirer and supplier. This is rather the beginning of the continued work. And if you do this based on this database where you have all the traceability, all the linking and historical changes and rules and things in there, you would be pretty sure that you have a common understanding of the case, and you should continue to do continue back in the V model to do the technical reviews and verification and things like that. So there's the need for data exchange is still there, but now since you have a contract relationship with one party that you probably will be cooperating with for an extended period of time, you will have options. You could establish any sort of data exchange based on available tools on each side. System Engineering Studio will help you with into working capabilities, remote SES capabilities, so on, if that's appropriate in the case. You always still have the opportunity to continue to use the same sorts of files for a continued work in internal reviews or external reviews for that matter, prepare data for changes and approve changes, and also specifically easy things like if you would have the sort of factory meeting where you would want to be able to do some updates in verification planning or whatever, you could just produce a file based on the data that you need for the purpose, bring it out with you and update it, and update the database when you get back. So there are many reasons you could continue to use any combination of these specific capabilities as I've been demonstrating, but with all the other capabilities at hand, depending on the available tools on each side. Few words about continued update. I've been mentioning bid evaluation. What we do have today is, as you have been seeing, we could generate files with rules, we could import replies that are consistent in format and so on. We could link all this data to an evaluation matrix for comparison inside our database, and we could support updates in bids and so on. But we will, in the next step in the near future, be able to also do some calculation of weighted grades based on the evaluation you do on imported bids. Longer term, we are looking into combining existing capabilities within System Engineering Studio to support in optimizing this evaluation matrix. What is more important than something else? We have decision management support tools, and we have ways of this. We will look into ways to simulate bids to validate if the evaluation matrix outcome is consistent with our expectations and so on. We could also prepare and produce evaluation reports of in sort of predefined ways. This is something that will, to some extent, include some further development, but also basically it will use already existing capabilities within System Engineering Studio. So let's have a quick look at the calculation of grades. If we would define some sort of evaluation tree saying that we will evaluate the system based on performance, based on functionality, based on cost, based on schedule or whatever, and we add weights to however how relative importance there is to each of these factors here. You could split them down to whatever level appropriate, assign weights all the way down. And then you could link to this the response you get in these response sheets. We'll say, okay, if I would want to analyze performance related to speed, these are the requirements that has something to do with this. If I should evaluate schedule or whatever, I will have this data that I've received in the same way. That's important for this case. And then I could add weights again, say, okay, this is our requirement, and this is how important it is relative to anything else in the same node. Bidder 1, bidder 2, bidder 3 have their responses collected from the response sheets, and the evaluation team simply needs to add grades comparing responses to the requirement or a question posed and so on. And there will be a simple calculation of upstream of grades based on this, so you would have a final outcome at the top level saying that this, in this case, bidder 3 obviously has done the best on this. The good thing with this is not being rocket science, but it's being reproducible and built by a tool, and it could also be tracked in history to see changes, and that's very good also for transparency, for equal treatment when it comes to a procurement situation. Not to mention how much it would actually simplify your evaluation by just breaking down the tasks to simple things where you would, in each case, have bid teams focus on their expertise, and they would focus on changes from each iteration to another. Okay, to wrap this up a bit, with this System Engineering Studio suite based on this, you could, as I've been mentioning, you could use your tool of choice for managing the requirements and other data which you could connect to this system. We could use existing capabilities within here to improve correctness, completeness, consistency. We could prepare these request for quotation packages with this capability, as I've been demonstrating. We could collect the bids, and they would be generic importable files and so on, and that would ensure that we would have comparable, easy comparable things from each bidder with the same format and the same rules followed. Evaluate this in parallel. You could link with this traceability to see that everything sort of goes together. Whenever something is getting close to contract, we can produce contractual documents straight from the source with the company profiles and everything you need. And we could continue data exchange after a contract signature based on whatever tools are available on each side. This still being an option. But also you could use the capabilities of these Excel files and these PDF files generated for all sorts of various purposes, internally or externally. And doing so, you would have full history and traceability inside your database throughout the life cycle. So with that, I think we are right now I've concluded the presentation, and I think Cecilia, you could probably now see if we have had any questions in the chat box as in the presentation, or if you would want to present the next upcoming webinar first.
Yes.
Are you with us, Cecilia?
Yes, thank you, Lars. So Lars will answer your questions in a minute. So please write down your questions, or if you have any comments, in the questions section. And while you're writing, I will talk about our upcoming webinar. Building a smarter acquisition benchmarking tool with Cosismo. And in this webinar, Christer Fröling will present a comprehensive acquisition benchmarking tool that builds on the constructive systems engineering cost model. This is Cosismo. And this methodology enables contracting agencies to improve cost estimation accuracy through evidence-based data calibration, evaluate supplier maturity and technical readiness using CMMI and TRL frameworks. You can assess lifecycle risks by applying TCO analysis to acquisition decisions, and classify and evaluate requirements quality with in-process guide to writing requirements. And ultimately, this approach helps agencies answer the question, who is the best supplier from a technical, economic, and project perspective, and what risks are involved? And the dates for this webinar are the 30th and 31st of October. So let's see if we have any questions. Yes, are there default rules for bidder attributes?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
Are there default rules for bidder attributes?
Okay. Default rules. Well, I think the answer to that is yes and no. We have a way of defining attributes and store them in what we call an attribute glossary. We could sort of apply these attributes with the descriptions and definitions to any connection in SES, and in some cases also out to the source connections. But the rules there, what we do have, we have some sort of a startup set based on the sort of startup attribute sets that you could tailor. And the rules, they are basically as I said, any Excel formulas. They could be imported and exported, and by that you could have some sort of default rules, but you should always tailor them. So in a way, we would be able to provide you with something to start with, but unfortunately, it's not all that easy to say to produce an attribute set and the set of rules that will always be valid. So I guess, yeah, again, the answer is yes, we will have something to start from, but you would definitely need to tailor it. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Another question, is there support for pictures in the exported Excel files and PDF documents?
Yes, there are. In this simple example I had, it was no pictures included, but there will be ways to present pictures in both Excel files and, of course, in the PDF documents. Yeah, there are some sort of limitation depending on what sort of source tool you have and what sort of ways these source tools can manage their pictures. But if you get them in, we will get it out in PDFs and the Excel files. Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have no more questions
Thank you.
right now, but if you have questions later or want more information, don't hesitate to contact us by email or through our website, reuscompany.com. So thank you very much, Lars, and thank you everybody for attending. And
Thank you all. Thank you. See you some other time, and thank you for your time and for your attention.